Okay, I've had some requests to get a little bit more information about JUnit and how you might use it on this project. I recognize the deadline's coming up, but I will try to do my best to give you a little information about how you might use it. First, what is JUnit? Well, I'm not going to do a great job describing JUnit, or at least I'm not going to do a better job describing JUnit than the people who created JUnit. So my suggestion is go to JUnit.org. They'll go through a walkthrough. However, the basics of JUnit are that it is going to allow you to write tests very easily. It's a framework for creating tests. And in our project, we're just going to do very simple tests. It's just to expose you to this idea of test-driven development, which is you can write the tests first and then progressively write your code and test it as you go. So as you can see, JUnit is a simple framework to write repeatable tests. And I'll demonstrate that very quickly on the test to convert to binary, which many people are asking questions about. Now, so first of all, convert to binary, what is it? Well, it's just going to be a method that you create to convert things the way you would like, right? So first off, I can look at the database files and make decisions about how I'm going to convert columns, right? So I look at this column 1, which is the 0th column, right? But we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So, and I see, looking at it, that it's all integers. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a decision. You know what? I'm going to store this text number as an integer. Okay, so how might I convert that to an integer? Well, basically I'm going to write my test first. So I'm going to, and this is tests you already have actually. I'm going to take my text number and I'm going to send it to convert to binary with column 1 and let's say 1, right? And then what this means is it's going to convert this text, because it's saying, oh, I'm going to do whatever the conversion process is for column 1 is, and turn that into some sort of integer. So it will return the value, and then it's going to use this assert. And there's many different asserts. This is assert equals, but based on what you're trying to compare, you can look at the different asserts. Assert, let me see, assert. And you can see there's tons of different asserts available to you in the JUnit framework. Assert equals is one of the common ones, and for us will be pretty effective for a lot of the tests we're doing. I could break this up into separate tests, but this seems fine. I'm testing one thing, whether or not, if I get a 1, I get what I expect back. Now, if I decide to do something different with convert text to binary, such as it's going to return a negative number if it's got invalid data, I could do something like that. For our purposes, it's fine to assume that it's just formatted correctly. So, we don't want to get too caught up in it, but in the future, it would be important when you're actually writing applications to consider bad data. So this first test, it says, oh, did you convert? If you're column 1, try to convert this using your conversion process based on 1. So I have to have this. So I write these tests first, which are pretty simple. Now I could do something, I could create a really big number, like the max int number, for instance, and see if that gets converted properly. Because there'd always be some interesting side effects. If you're at the maximum or minimum, there's potential errors, right? Those are edge cases. So I could also include some edge cases if I wanted, which you should always consider edge cases, right? So I couldn't consider 0, which of course really isn't an edge case. It's actually a middle case in this case. Okay, so now I have the convert column test done, but up in my database reader, I have to actually write the code. So here's the simple code I've written for that. I go ahead, oh, if you're column number 1, I want you to just do a parse int on whatever the string value is and return it. All right. So now we save that. Now, I'm always going to have a return value. So here is the default return value for this, because obviously if it's not column 1, I need to return something. Now, I could decide here that if I don't find something valid, I return -1. Now, that assumes that none of the data you're returning has valid negative numbers, which you can make a decision about that. And if I do this, though, now I should add a test for that too. Default column, columns I don't use, columns that I decide I'm not going to convert, like perhaps the last column, I might return that -1 for. Okay, so now I have at least the first case taken care of. So how do I run my JUnit tests? So I go back to my convert to binary, and I can say run as JUnit test, and the first test passed. This passes. I was like, okay, great. Well, what am I going to do in the second column? So let's go look again at my data, and I should be a little more thorough than I'm being, which is I should go look through the data, check to see what the values are. What if I figure out that the maximum value for this is 100? It's not. There's 124. But if it were, I could make other decisions about how I'm going to store it. But I can, in fact, store it as an int, and that's what I'm going to do again. So I'll give you a little bonus here. So what would that look like on my first? I'm going to do my tests. So my tests pretty much would be pretty similar, right? So these are going to be similar tests. I'm going to say, oh, same basic tests, because all I'm really going to do, right, is parse it, do parse int on it again. But now I have to change the column number, right? All right. So I change the column number. So now when this gets called, it will send 2 in as an argument, and it should do something different, right? Well, if it run this test now, it's still going to fail, right? Because I haven't written any code. So what is it going to return? -1. So let's go up here to my database reader, and I'm going to say, well, I could add end, or equals column 2. And equals column 2 would not work. I could do or, but for now, let's do this. Let's say, oh, you know what? I'm going to do another conditional, which is absolutely not the way you should do this. You have other abilities. But what if I make a mistake? What if I say, oh, 3 instead of 2, and then I go to run my tests again. And I'm gonna run as JUnit test, and my test fails, and I'm like, oh, what happened? So that clues me into the fact that something wasn't working, And the other thing is as I make changes to my my database reader convert to text to binary, I may make a mistake that breaks one of the older tests. Let me put this to 2, see if I have better results. So again, I'm going to run these tests, run as JUnit test, and now it passes. So I'll do one more for you. Let's look at maybe something more difficult. Okay, so now I have this third column, which appears to just be a character. So, and it's always length 1. So how might I handle that? Well, effectively, a character is integral data. So let me see. I'll think about these tests. Right? Do this. Oops, wrong thing. I switch between Mac and Windows and I forget the. Sometimes you change the paste. Okay, so now, but I'm not going to pass in ones, right? I'm going to pass in, say, an A or a C. What were some of the other ones? Was there a C? No, it's AOF. AOF, AOF. Okay, so it's AOF. So O F. Right? So that is going to, what am I going to do there? I don't know. Okay. So what do I expect to get back from A, the character A, or the string A? So I can be creative and I can say what I expect back is, make this hard on me, is A. And its integer value. All right. So can I do that? We'll find out. Again with my inadequate pasting skills. All right. So go down here. O F. All right. So now I have my test. If I run this test now, this should fail. And that's not always a bad thing. Because one of the things is, by running that, that's a good thing. Otherwise, it might indicate maybe your tests aren't so great. So he doesn't even like it. What does it say here? It says put string. No, it's not. Let's see here. Back to there. All right. It is. Oh, that's inside the. That's in that convert to binary method. All right. There. And this is a good example. What's happened? I'm in this code. See if you're looking here. I'm in this code, and I'm like, wait a second. I'm supposed to be testing column 3. So if I go back to my tests, I can update the column to 3. And now you saw I got an error because it did try to do a parse int on an invalid item. And then let me go ahead and run my test. And now it just fails instead of getting an error. Okay. So now I can go back up to my database reader and say, well, how do I want to convert that? What I want to return is the integer value that represents the first character. And again, I'm going to assume that that it is in the correct format, meaning that I know it only has one and exactly one item. Oh, I can do charat's probably better. I'll use charat. because I only want the one character, right? So we're going to go at 0 index. So it should give me the... Now, that's going to be a character. So I have to tell it, well, I want to force this to be an int. Later, when I go to save that, I might have a different idea about that. I might go ahead and if it's a int, but I know I can save it in the width of a char, I might cast it to a char, but we'll go back to that. Okay, you'll get to that later. So now I have this code. Does it work? I don't know. Let's take a run at it. And it claims it works. So it claims that, in fact, indeed, it's taking this. Now, I could decide that I'm uncomfortable with this, and I actually want to look up the ASCII value for A. That's acceptable as well. So let's see if I can. Nice big chart of ASCII values. 65. So if I were to take, instead of this in my equals test, I could say 65. I have an extra parentheses now. And then I can say, you know what? I better rerun my tests and make sure I haven't broken my test. And it still passes. So I can change these other letters as well if I want, which, because that's sort of what I'm doing in the original, in the other one, I might feel more comfortable with the 65, saying, I want to make sure it's the integer 65 because I know that corresponds on the ASCII table to the A, and then the F is 70, so I can go and change this to a 70 if I want. I can once again rerun my tests, which if you look up here, the most recent tests are actually available to me. So there's lots of ways to do that. It doesn't like that. It failed. And why did it fail? Is because I looked up the code for F, which is 70, which is down here. So this is why you do these things. So then I have to find the code for O. O is 79, and so I can change that to 79, and then I can once again run it, and now it passes. So now I have created some of my convert to binary code, and again, this code is based on decisions I'm making about how I want to store the data eventually. This one I'm probably going to straight up store as an int. Same with this one. This one, I might do, while I'm returning an int, that might be for comparison purposes, but I have some knowledge about the size of that. I know that the biggest int I should ever receive in that case is 90. So I probably could store it as a char, right, which is going to take up less space. Now, I'll have to keep track of that, though. So you'll have to figure out a way to say, oh, I'm in column 3. How do I want to save my int? Do I want to save it as an int? Do I want to save it as a char, a short? So there's different ways to save the data as well. Even they're all going to be integral, except for maybe some of the strings. All right. So that was a quick example of using JUnit in your development process, the test-driven development. You write the tests, and then you go back and you create the code, and then you test. And the nice part about this is that as you change your code, you can easily retest everything that you've done already. So if you make a mistake and break something that you thought you already had working correctly, it will jump out at you. All right. So, but remember, if you want to know more about JUnit, they have a lot of information. You can take a little tour on JUnit to learn more. But for our purposes, for the most part, what you're going to be using is are the asserts, which basically they are what determine whether or not the test passes. It does this assert, and it says if this test fails, that is 65 was not equal to found, then bam, you get the little blue arrow. If it passes, if all these asserts end up being true, that 65 equals 79 equals, then you get the little green connector. All right, so that's it for this video. I hope it helps you continuing on with your work.